Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into one of the wildest, most elemental stories in history, the full, unexpurgated saga of the god of thunder, Thor. Strap in, because this isn't the sanitized, theme park version. We are heading straight into the cold, chaotic mists of the Norse cosmos, where frost giants are constantly trying to demolish everything, and your dad is an eye-patch-wearing, spear-chucking maniac named Odin. Just picture this. You're standing right on the edge of a place called Bifrost. That giant, shimmering rainbow bridge. Below you, the abyss drops away into the void of Jörmungandr, and above, the gold-plated towers of Asgard pierce the sky. You feel the constant rumble in the air, a deep, bass thrumming that makes your bones vibrate. That's the sound of the future crashing into the present. That's the ambient noise of a world perpetually on the brink. You might think you know this guy, but trust me, understanding the real Thor means understanding that the entire Norse worldview is a ticking clock counting down to total destruction. You probably won't survive this, metaphorically, of course. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is right now. It always blows my mind how many of you are tuning in from different corners of the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your existence begins, not with a bang, but with a complex divine affair. Your father is Odin, the Allfather, a being of unmatched knowledge and terrifying power. But your mother is not Frigg, the queen of the Aesir. No, your mother is the very earth beneath Asgard's foundations. A primal giantess named Jörð, or sometimes Fjörgen, depending on which ancient poet you ask. This detail is crucial. You aren't purely an Aesir god. The noble tribe of Odin, you are half earth, half giant, and all power, which means your strength is rooted in the wild, untamed forces of nature itself. Unlike your more cerebral and politically minded siblings, historians still argue whether Jörð was truly considered a giantess, Jotun, or simply a personification of the raw earth force. But either way, your dual parentage gives you that fiery, untamable temper and that unparalleled physical might. It's what makes you you. You grow up in Asgard, but you are not like the others. While your half-brother Baldur is all light and perfection, a favorite amongst the court, you are a booming presence. A wrecking ball in a kingdom built on diplomacy and arcane secrets. Odin sees this raw, kinetic energy in you. He doesn't try to dampen it, he tries to focus it. You spend your formative years not learning the subtle arts of poetry or rune casting, but mastering combat, feeling the sheer, joyful release of hitting something incredibly hard. Your earliest training grounds are less about sparring and more about simply destroying practice targets that would vaporize a lesser god. One mainstream historical fact to keep in mind: the worship of Thor, known in the Germanic world as Donner, actually predates the widespread worship of Odin in many parts of Northern Europe. Particularly among agricultural and common folk, Thor was the protector against famine and storm, a much more immediate concern than Odin's realms of war and poetry. This tells you something about the core appeal of your character. You're the dependable defender of the ordinary person. Your favorite place isn't the grand feasting hall Valhalla, but Bilskirnir, your own magnificent palace in the realm of Ruhamur, Thrudheim, which reputedly has 540 chambers, a massive bachelor pad. Basically, this is where you store your energy, your enthusiasm, and your future. Now, a quirky tidbit about your early years. Legend says you were so strong, even as an infant, that Odin had to send you away to be fostered elsewhere because you were constantly smashing everything in Asgard. Imagine the divine daycare dilemma. Sorry, Allfather, but he just chewed through the tungsten crib again and vaporized the nanny dwarf. You develop an intense, though complicated, relationship with your adopted brother, Loki. Loki is all silver-tongued whispers and razor-sharp intellect. You're the blunt force trauma that occasionally follows him around to clean up his messes, or, just as often, to cause new ones. You genuinely love his company. Mostly because he's the only one who can consistently trick you into doing something stupid but exciting. His schemes are usually the catalyst for your greatest adventures. It's that classic duo, the brains and the brawn, perpetually on a chaotic road trip. You rely on his wit, even though you know he is intrinsically untrustworthy. And he relies on your ability to smash whatever cosmic problem he's created. That relationship is the engine that drives so much of the early mythology forward. As your immense strength grows, you begin to feel the pull of your true destiny, protecting the realms from the Jotnar, the frost giants and the mountain giants who constantly scheme from their cold, terrifying stronghold of Jotunheimr. You are the wall between the giants and everyone else. The world outside Asgard is harsh, cold, and hungry, and you, young Thor, feel an almost magnetic pull toward the borders. It's not just duty, it's a visceral need to test the limits of your immense, burgeoning power. You have the boundless energy of a teenager who just discovered heavy metal. And the only appropriate outlet is punching an ice-covered titan. Your formal training shifts quickly from controlled sparring to actual skirmishes. Odin, recognizing that you learn best through extreme application, often sends you on seemingly impossible missions. You trudge through the treacherous, bone-chilling mountain passes that separate the civilized realms from Jotunheimr, where the air itself seems hostile and every snowflake is potentially a spying eye. You're learning that a giant fight is never a clean fight. They don't fight for honor, they fight for dominion. Using trickery, massive environmental manipulation, and raw, intimidating malice, you learn to rely on sheer, unadulterated velocity and impact. In your first truly brutal encounters, you realize that your divine strength alone isn't enough. You are powerful, yes, but the giants are enormous, capable of shattering mountains with a single blow. This leads to an inevitable, yet often humorous, moment of divine growth. You are famously a straight shooter, relying on direct engagement. Loki, observing one of your early, nearly disastrous battles, probably offered a snarky comment about your lack of finesse. Perhaps, he might have purred, "You should hit them with the other half of the mountain, brother," and you likely took his advice literally. You are training with the best, the warriors of Asgard, but your real learning happens on the battlefield. You learn to brace against the earth-shaking impacts, to use the giants' own momentum against them. And most importantly, you cultivate the legendary Ruvingr strength field, that divine, rage-fueled strength that makes you unstoppable when truly provoked. It's interesting to remember that in many historical sources, the Viking Age, a mainstream historical fact, was often characterized by the worship of both Odin and Thor. But for different purposes, sailors, farmers, and the common infantry often preferred Thor, the straightforward protector, while chieftains and poets favored Odin, the god of wisdom and ecstatic fury, or, you're the accessible god, the one whose power feels tangible, like the crackle of a coming storm, not the distant whisper of hidden lore. One quirky or fringe tidbit is that early Germanic tribes sometimes believed that the sounds of thunder were actually the wheels of your chariot rattling across the sky. You didn't just create the storm, you were the storm's chaotic conveyance, tearing through the atmosphere at breakneck speed, probably complaining about the lack of good roads in the cosmic infrastructure. It must be tough on your steeds. Tan Grisnir and Tanioster, the goats who pull your chariot. Legend has it you can actually eat them for dinner, then resurrect them the next morning just by blessing their bones with your hammer. Try explaining that to your chiropractor. You develop a reputation quickly. The giants in Jotunheimr begin to whisper your name with fear. They realize that this golden-haired, red-bearded, loud, and utterly unpretentious god is their greatest threat. You are the living embodiment of the divine will to stop the endless march of primordial chaos. Your early adventures cement your position as Asgard's frontline defense. But it's not just fighting. Sometimes it's a diplomatic mission gone wrong, or a rescue mission for a stolen goddess, or just the result of Loki needing a strong arm to punch his way out of a predicament he's talked himself into. You are the heavy, and you carry that burden, and that hammer. Eventually, with boisterous pride. Historians still argue whether the earliest myths of Thor were inherently peaceful, as protector of the harvest, or exclusively martial, as destroyer of chaos. But your actions clearly demonstrate a blend. You protect the community so they can thrive. And the only way to protect them is often through decisive, thunderous violence against the eternal enemy. You find yourself increasingly drawn to Sif, a stunning goddess whose golden hair is said to rival the gleam of Asgard's finest gold. She is strength and beauty combined. a worthy companion for the god of thunder. Your relationship with her, however, provides the backdrop for one of the most famous and most damaging pranks ever perpetrated in the Nine Realms, an event which will directly lead to the forging of your most iconic weapons. You think your life is pure giant-smashing joy, but little do you know, your brother Loki is about to make things incredibly personal and incredibly awkward. You're about to face a threat that can't be solved with muscle, only with the terrifying efficiency of divine retribution and forced craftsmanship. You trudge back toward Bilskirnir after a successful skirmish, the adrenaline wearing off, the smell of frost and burnt giant hide clinging to your armor. You anticipate Sif's welcome, the warmth, the quiet moments that break up the endless fighting. That anticipation is a soft spot in your otherwise impenetrable defense, and Loki knows exactly how to exploit it. He is watching you return, a mischievous, calculating glint in his eye, already setting the stage for the next, much more domestic disaster. You finally reach Asgard, weary but triumphant, smelling slightly of singed sulfur and the metallic tang of giant blood. The massive carved doors of Bilskirnir swing inward, and you anticipate the sight of Sif, her legendary golden hair a waterfall of sunshine in the dimming twilight. You drop your heavy, mud-caked armor with a clang that shakes the foundations, eager for rest and companionship. But something is immediately wrong. The atmosphere is tense, thick with an unnatural silence. When you finally find Sif, she is weeping silently, her head covered. You rush to her, your massive hand surprisingly gentle as you lift her chin. What you see sends a cold, pure, uncontrollable wave of fury through your entire being, eclipsing even your battle rage. Sif's glorious hair, the pride of Asgard and the envy of every goddess, is gone, shaved down to the scalp, leaving only patchy, stubbled pink flesh. It is a profound, humiliating violation, not just of her beauty, but of your shared honor. You don't even need to ask. You know instantly who is responsible. There is only one person in all the Nine Realms capable of such petty, cruel malice, delivered with artistic precision and zero physical evidence. Loki. You track him down, not with a logical investigation, but with the sheer force of your righteous anger. When you find him, he is likely sitting innocently, maybe polishing a magical spoon or braiding a lock of his own ridiculously well-maintained hair, pretending to be deeply engrossed in a scroll. The confrontation is immediate, violent, and utterly terrifying. You seize Loki with a grip that threatens to crush his divine bones into dust. You lift him, perhaps dangling him over the void or simply slamming him against a wall of pure Asgardian bedrock. You are completely beyond rational thought. You are the storm unbound. And the only thing that saves Loki's life is his quick wit and the realization that his brother, Thor, is truly prepared to end him. Loki, pale with fear, stammers out a promise of restitution. He swears upon his chaotic life that he will not only restore Sif's hair but make it even more magnificent. You release him, the air crackling around you, warning him that if he fails, this pain will be the least of his worries. The anger burns inside you, a slow-release venom, fueled by the mainstream historical fact that in Norse society, a woman's hair was often inextricably linked to her status, marriage, and fertility, making Loki's prank an incredibly severe symbolic assault on your entire household. To fix this colossal screw-up, Loki knows he can't use mundane magic. He must seek the legendary master craftsmen of the deep, the dwarves, or Divergar. These subterranean smiths, dwelling in places like Svartalfheimr, are renowned for their unmatched skill in forging magical artifacts. Loki descends to the workshops of the master smiths, the sons of Ivaldi. He sweet talks, cajoles, and ultimately threatens them into creating a covering for Sif's head made of pure gold threads so fine they would instantly grow and flow like natural hair when placed on her head. But Loki, being Loki, can't resist taking things further. He then gets into a drunken, reckless boast with two other master smith brothers, Brokkr and Sindri. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that the dwarves were often described in early literature not just as small beings, but sometimes as pale creatures who feared the sun because its light would turn them to stone. This detail adds a layer of danger to Loki's journey, as he must conduct his negotiations quickly and deep underground. Loki boasts that the sons of Ivaldi have created the greatest treasures ever seen, Sif's new hair, a magnificent ship for Freyr, Skiblanr, and a powerful spear for Odin, Gungnir, and that no other dwarf could possibly create 3 items of equal or greater value. This arrogant challenge is exactly what you, Thor, need. Brokkr and Sindri accept the challenge, wagering their own heads against Loki's, a promise Loki seals with a nervous but confident grin. The contest is set. 3 incredible items from the sons of Ivaldi versus 3 equally incredible items from Brokkr and Sindri. The true prize, ultimately, will be determined by the judgment of the gods, and the immediate safety of your brother's neck. You wait impatiently in Asgard, the tension a physical knot in your gut, knowing the resolution to this shame rests on the outcome of a blacksmith's boast orchestrated by the single most unreliable being in the universe. Historians still argue whether this tale was originally a single competition or a composite of various creation myths. But its role as the origin story for Asgard's greatest weapons is undeniable. You are about to become the proud owner of an artifact that will define your very existence. Loki returns from the subterranean kingdom of the dwarves, not sneaking, but striding with the annoying confidence of a man who has successfully engineered a terrible situation into a potentially profitable one for himself. At least, he brings with him the 6 promised artifacts, each one pulsing with concentrated, deep earth magic, ready for presentation before the Council of the Gods in Asgard. You are there, of course, standing beside Odin, your arms crossed, radiating a barely contained, earth-shattering anger that keeps everyone else at a respectful, nervous distance. You are the ultimate judge in this show. Because if the prize artifacts aren't up to par, Loki's head is forfeit. First, the sons of Ivaldi present their 3 treasures. Sif is brought forward, and the silken fine strands of golden hair are laid upon her shorn scalp. Immediately, they take root, cascading down her shoulders in a torrent of living, shimmering gold. It's magnificent, far exceeding the beauty of her original hair. The shame is lifted. You feel the first genuine sense of relief you've had in days. Though you still glare at Loki. Just on principle, the Smiths also present Odin's spear, Gungnir, which will never miss its mark, and Freyr's self-folding, wind-propelled ship, Skiblanr. All are deemed spectacular. Now, it is the turn of Brokkr and Sindri. Brokkr steps forward, while his brother Sindri operates the bellows in the forge. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that Brokkr's ability to successfully create these items relies entirely on Sindri's relentless work at the bellows, which he must maintain while dealing with the constant harassment of a sneaky, shape-shifting gadfly, Loki, trying to sabotage the process. The dwarves present their first item, a great golden ring, Draupnir, that every 9th night drops 8 rings of equal weight and purity, a symbol of endless wealth and generosity, gifted to Odin. Next, they unveil the golden bristled boar, Gullinbursti, which pulls Freyr's chariot through the air faster than any horse, day or night, and brightens the darkest roads. Then, Brokkr pulls out the final item, still glowing slightly from the deep heat of the forge, a short-handled, compact war hammer. He presents it to you, Thor. He explains its properties. This is Mjölnir. It will never fail you. No matter how hard you swing it, it will always strike its target. When you throw it, it will always return to your hand, and it can be shrunk to fit inside your shirt for easy carrying. He pauses, adding the single caveat, that infamous, iconic flaw, its handle is a little short. Because that trickster Loki managed to distract my brother for just a moment during the forging. The moment Mjölnir is in your hands, you feel it. It is not just a weapon, it is an extension of your very being. A conduit for the primal forces you inherited from Jörð. You swing it, and the air immediately explodes with thunder and lightning. The council realizes instantly the true worth of this weapon. It is the greatest defensive tool Asgard could possess, the ultimate weapon against the giants. The gods unanimously declare the 3 items from Brokkr and Sindri, Draupnir, Gullinbursti, and Mjölnir, to be the superior treasures. Loki has lost the wager, and the dwarves prepare to take his head. But Loki, ever the lawyer, reminds them that he only pledged his head, not his neck, claiming they cannot remove the head without damaging the neck, which was not part of the deal. It's an irritatingly successful legal loophole that saves his life. You watch, mildly amused despite yourself, as the dwarves, frustrated, simply sew Loki's mouth shut, stitching his lips together as a temporary measure to keep the lying tongue quiet. A temporary, but satisfying, silencing. This is the day you receive the two other artifacts that complete the trinity of your power. Along with Mjölnir, you are given Jarngripr, the iron gloves, necessary because Mjölnir is so hot and heavy that without them, no god, not even you, can grip the hammer to wield its full power. Finally, you are given the magic belt, Mjölnir, which, when worn, doubles your already colossal strength. A mainstream historical fact, the runic inscription on the rock stone in Sweden, one of the most famous Viking Age runestones, contains an allusion to the myth of Thor fighting the Midgard serpent, suggesting this was a core and well-known part of the mythological canon even in the 9th century. Your new hammer will be central to that future confrontation. Now, with Mjölnir in hand, the iron gloves protecting your grip, and the strength belt wrapped around your waist, you are no longer just a strong god, you are the undisputed champion of the Aesir. Their thunderous first line of defense. The short handle is annoying, a constant, quirky reminder of Loki's mischief, but it's a flaw you learn to live with. Historians still argue whether the short handle was an original part of the myth or a later interpolation to explain the hammer's unique, compact shape. Either way, it makes your swing uniquely powerful. You stand tall, the master of the storm, ready to defend the 9 realms from all comers. With the legendary trinity of artifacts, Mjölnir, Jarngripr, and Mjölnir, now your constant companions, you feel the electric surge of focused power. You are eager to put them to the test. And as luck would have it, or rather, as Loki's boredom would have it, a new adventure presents itself almost immediately. This tale starts in a seemingly mundane way. You're traveling without Mjölnir. Historians still argue whether you frequently left the hammer at home due to its immense weight or whether it was a narrative device to allow for more vulnerable, high-stakes stories. In this case, you and Loki are traveling without it, perhaps heading to Midgard for a quick, incognito vacation, or, more likely, because Loki bet you couldn't survive a week relying only on your wits. That would be a guaranteed loss for you. Frankly. You and Loki reach the domain of the giant Geirr, a singularly cruel and dangerous specimen, known particularly for his hatred of the gods. You are lured to his hall by trickery. Perhaps by Loki's carelessness or a malicious giantess named Geirr, depending on the account. Crucially, as you arrive, you realize your critical error. You left your hammer and your iron gloves behind. This is the divine equivalent of arriving at a final boss fight realizing you left your best weapon charging at home. You are completely exposed, but fortunately, the aforementioned giantess, Geirr, takes pity on you. Recognizing the sheer danger you are in, she secretly gives you 3 essential items to replace your missing gear: her own iron gloves, a magic strength belt, and a powerful staff called Gríarvöllur, Geirr's rod or staff. This unexpected kindness allows you to face Geirr on almost equal footing. A quirky or fringe tidbit demonstrating that not all giants were uniformly evil. Some were simply inhabitants of Jotunheimr who valued fair play. Or perhaps just enjoyed seeing their wicked king get humbled. You trudge onward into Geirr's formidable hall, the atmosphere thick with malicious intent. The giants have rigged the place like a divine funhouse of death traps. You and Loki, who is doing his best impression of an innocent bystander, are shown to a small resting chamber. As you sit down on the only bench, you realize the bench is rising, rapidly lifting you toward the spike-studded ceiling with the intention of impaling you. This is where your raw, elemental power shines. Remember that Gríarvöllur? You brace the staff against the rafters above and shove down with all your double magical strength. The bench is not stopped, rather. The pressure is so immense that the foundations of the entire hall tremble. And the force bursts through the floorboards below. 2 of Geirr's daughters, giantesses named Yalp and Grape, who were hiding under the bench to enact the trap, are crushed to death by the impact. Your response is immediate and visceral, demonstrating the brutal efficiency of your methods. Solve the problem by applying overwhelming force to the obstacle, regardless of collateral damage. The main confrontation occurs in the Great Hall. Geirr, Observing your prowess, decides to try a direct, physical assault. He grabs a massive, glowing piece of molten iron with tongs and hurls it across the room directly at you. This iron is hot enough to melt mountains. And you are without Mjölnir. But you have Grir's iron gloves. You swiftly raise your hands, catch the colossal chunk of metal, and hurl it straight back at Grir. The force of the throw is unimaginable. Fueled by your inherited power and the boost from the two strength belts, Mjölnir and Grir's belt, potentially making you quadruply strong. Imagine that gym day. The mainstream historical fact here is that this kind of reciprocal weapon hurling, an eye for an eye, applied with superhuman force, was a common motif in Germanic heroic literature, emphasizing direct justice and equal retaliation. The blazing missile hits Grir square in the chest, shattering him and the throne he was sitting on. The giant king is utterly destroyed. His reign of terror instantly ended. You stand victorious, having proved that even stripped of your famous hammer, your inherent strength, combined with the right tools, makes you unstoppable. The giant's plan to humiliate and destroy you without your signature weapon has failed spectacularly. You and Loki take your leave, having thoroughly wrecked the hall and decisively eliminated a major threat to Asgard. You return Grir's gifts with gratitude, realizing how close you came to disaster. This adventure is a critical lesson. Never underestimate the necessity of preparation. And always be wary of Loki's travel planning. You resolve never to travel far without Mjölnir again. Historians still argue whether the myth of Grir was intended to highlight Thor's reliance on magic artifacts or his inherent, underlying physical supremacy. You just know that it was a lot easier when you could simply zap them with the hammer. You're the god of thunder, not the god of staff-wielding and sneaky evasion. You thought you had learned your lesson after the Grir fiasco. Never part with Mjölnir. But sometimes, fate, or rather, the boundless hubris of the giants, forces your hand. This time, the problem is not that you left your hammer, but that it was stolen right out from under the nose of Asgard. Imagine waking up, reaching for the comforting, charged weight of Mjölnir, only to find the space beside you cold and empty. The panic that surges through you is profound. A raw, terrifying experience. Without Mjölnir, the very existence of Asgard is threatened. The giants know this. They know you are nothing but a very strong, very angry god with a pair of fancy gloves if you can't summon the thunder. The thief is identified quickly. The arrogant and powerful giant Thrym, who rules his icy kingdom of Jotunheimr. He has hidden Mjölnir deep underground and sends a messenger to Asgard with an insolent demand. His price for the hammer's return? Nothing less than the beautiful goddess Freya, or Freya, to be his bride. This is where the story pivots from an action film to a genuinely ridiculous sitcom. Freya, naturally, refuses with a scream so loud it shakes the halls of Asgard. The gods gather in council. Desperate and humiliated, they must get Mjölnir back. But they cannot sacrifice Freya. And they certainly cannot storm Jotunheimr without their primary defensive weapon. They are trapped. The wise god Heimdallr, ever watchful, proposes a solution so utterly absurd, so embarrassing, that only Loki could have conceived of it, but Heimdallr gets the credit. The plan? You, Thor, must dress up as the prospective bride. Freya, travel to Jotunheimr, and retrieve the hammer yourself. You are apoplectic. You, the god of thunder, the embodiment of manly strength and martial pride. Wearing a wedding gown? The mere thought makes your red beard bristle with fury. You sputter and object, concerned that dressing in women's clothes will damage your reputation as a strong warrior. A mainstream historical fact being that cross-dressing, especially for a warrior, was often considered a serious form of social disgrace or emasculation, in Norse culture. Which explains your profound horror at the idea. Loki, however, is delighted. He quickly steps in, reminding you of the greater threat, and offering to accompany you as your faithful maidservant. Your protests fade under the weight of necessity. The transformation begins. You are dressed in a beautiful, flowing wedding gown, adorned with Freya's signature necklace, Brisingamen, and given a veil to conceal your enormous, booming, thunder god features, which, let's be honest, were not designed for subtlety. You look like a very muscular, heavily bearded, and incredibly grumpy bride. The image is so ludicrous it's almost heroic. A quirky or fringe tidbit from this adventure is that the gods had to attach jingling keys to your belt, a traditional marker of a married woman's status and authority in a Norse household. Picture that. The god of thunder, clanging and jingling his way across the rainbow bridge. You and Loki, playing the maidservant with unnerving enthusiasm, trundle off to Jotunheimr. Riding in your goat-drawn chariot, Thrym, overjoyed, organizes a massive, celebratory wedding feast. The minute you, as the bride, sit down, your true nature begins to show. You consume 8 whole salmon, an entire ox, and drink 3 barrels of mead, the divine equivalent of destroying the entire buffet. Thrym, suspicious, asks the maidservant, Loki, why the bride eats so much. Loki, quick-witted as always, smoothly answers, the poor bride hasn't eaten in 8 long nights. So great was her longing for her wedding day and her future husband. Thrym, flattered, tries to sneak a peek beneath your veil, but he is confronted by your ferocious eyes, which are burning with divine rage. Loki quickly explains this. 2. Claiming the bride hasn't slept in 8 nights. So great was her longing. You probably shot him a look that promised him an immediate lightning strike the second you got Mjölnir back. The moment of truth arrives. To consecrate the marriage, Thrym commands that Mjölnir be brought forth and placed in the bride's lap. He intends to use the very hammer that protects the gods as a ritual blessing for his union with the goddess. As Mjölnir is laid upon your lap, you feel that familiar, electric connection. The rage, held in check for days, finally breaks free. You tear off the veil, seize the hammer, and the sound of thunder finally returns to the 9 realms. You don't just kill Thrym, you obliterate him, along with his entire giant wedding party, single-handedly turning the feast into a catastrophic mess of shattered ice and divine retribution. You did the unthinkable, dressed in drag, swallowed your pride, and used Loki's deceit to your advantage to save Asgard. Historians still argue whether the Lay of Thrym, Rimskvia, the poem recounting this event, was intended as a serious heroic epic or a comic parody of heroic tropes. But its enduring popularity speaks volumes about its effectiveness as a story. You return to Asgard, your dignity bruised, your stomach full, but Mjölnir safely back in your hands. Never to leave again, at least. Not by your own choice. Despite the Thrym episode being an unmitigated triumph of strategy, Loki's, and blunt force, yours. Your inherent pride remains bruised. You are the god of strength, and you hate feeling foolish or outmatched. So, when the next major adventure arrives, you are desperate to prove that your physical power is absolutely, undeniably supreme, beyond any trickery. This quest takes you deep into the heart of Jotunheimr, accompanied by Loki and a young mortal named Jolfi, who serves you after an accidental transgression. A quirky or fringe tidbit demonstrating the constant, casual interactions between gods and mortals in the Norse world. You are heading toward the formidable stronghold of Útgarðar-Loki, the giant king of the outer realm, a master of illusion and psychological warfare. As you approach the great gates, the sheer scale of the giant kingdom is overwhelming. The stones are colossal, the architecture seems to defy logic, and the air hums with subtle, confusing magic. The giants, massive and condescending, greet you with thinly veiled contempt. Útgarðar-Loki himself is impossibly tall, his voice resonating like rocks shifting deep underground. You are immediately challenged, not to a battle, but to a series of contests designed to prove your divine superiority. You, confident in your raw power, accept without hesitation. The first challenge is a simple eating contest. Loki, always eager to compete, volunteers to race against a giant named Logi, fire. Loki uses his speed and gluttony. But the giant Logi doesn't just eat the meat, he consumes the bones, the trough, and eventually, the very heat of the fire itself. Loki is defeated. Loki's problem is he is fast. Logi's problem is that he is the elemental personification of wildfire, consuming everything in his path. Next, Jolfi is challenged to a foot race against a giant named Hugi. Jolfi, who is famously quick, a mainstream historical fact being that Jolfi and his sister Röskva are often cited as examples of the rapid transition from mortals to divine servants. Emphasizing mobility and speed, runs with blinding velocity, But Hugi leaves him in the dust, easily beating him in 3 consecutive races. Now it is your turn. Thor, you step forward. Mjölnir gripped tightly. The king, Útgarðar-Loki, smiles, a chilling, unsettling gesture, and proposes a challenge that he claims is simple enough for a mere mortal. You must lift his small, gray house cat. You scoff. A cat? For the god of thunder? You bend down, bracing yourself. You strain. You use all your divine strength. You engage the Mjölnir strength belt. You pull. You grunt. You roar. But the cat's grip on the floor is absolute. You pull with such force that your face turns red and the muscles in your neck threaten to burst. Yet the best you can manage is to lift one single paw off the ground. The entire hall of giants erupts in mocking laughter. You are furious, humiliated, and utterly baffled. To regain some shred of dignity, you demand a drinking challenge. Útgarðar-Loki brings you a massive horn carved from bone, filled to the brim. He boasts that his men can empty it in a single drink. Though 2 or 3 are acceptable for the weaker ones. You take the horn, bring it to your lips, and tilt it back, expecting to drain it effortlessly. You gulp down a tremendous quantity, draining your lungs, but when you lower the horn, the liquid level has barely dropped. You try again, drinking until you feel dizzy. Still, the level is only slightly lower. You make a final, desperate attempt, emptying yourself of every ounce of thirst. But the level stubbornly remains near the top. You concede, defeated, your pride shattered by a mere cup of mead and a house cat. You look around the mocking hall, your temper frayed to the breaking point. You demand a final challenge, a challenge of raw combat. Útgarðar-Loki agrees, but he does not offer one of his imposing warriors. Instead, he presents an opponent he calls Ellie, a seemingly frail, wrinkled old woman. This is the ultimate insult. You, the mighty god of thunder, are expected to wrestle an elderly female giantess. Yet, you accept. You grip the old woman, intending to quickly dispatch her, but she is surprisingly strong. As the wrestling match begins, you struggle. You use your strength, your training, your belt, but Ellie is immovable. The match becomes a brutal, exhausting grind. Slowly, horrifyingly, the old woman begins to press you down, forcing you to one knee. You have never been defeated physically in your life. But here, in this hall of shadows and sneers, you are beaten by a grandmother. You sink your head in shame. Defeated, you are ordered out of the hall. Your journey an abysmal failure. Historians still argue whether the theme of this tale is the inherent superiority of magic over brute force or a philosophical lesson that even gods cannot overcome the elemental laws of the universe. You walk away, clutching Mjölnir, but feeling smaller than ever. The hammer seems heavy and cold in your grasp. You and your companions, a thoroughly bewildered Loki and a silent, humbled Jolfi, are escorted out of the colossal hall of Útgarðar-Loki. The feeling of failure is a crushing, physical weight, heavier than Mjölnir itself. You were defeated, not by strength, but by baffling, inexplicable magic, and you are consumed by a furious desire for vengeance. You are, after all, the god of strength. Being overpowered by an old woman feels like an existential crisis. As you stride across the misty plain, the giant king Útgarðar-Loki strides alongside you, perhaps a few paces back, smiling that infuriatingly condescending smile. Just as you reach the giant kingdom's boundary, he stops you. He looks at you, his enormous eyes alight with something that isn't quite malice, but certainly isn't kindness. He starts speaking, and what he reveals is a torrent of mind-bending truths that immediately restore your wounded pride, while simultaneously filling you with impotent rage. If I had known the sheer terror of your strength, Thor, you would have never entered my hall. He booms, his voice shaking the earth. All of the contests were illusions, engineered by my magic to deceive you and protect my kingdom. He begins to explain the truth behind your embarrassing failures. Loki's loss in the eating contest? His opponent, Loki, was not a man, but the destructive, elementally charged personification of wildfire. Loki ate quickly, but Loki consumed matter itself, the literal flames. Next, Jolfi's loss in the footrace? His opponent, Hugi, was not a giant, but the manifestation of thought or idea. No one, not even the fastest god or mortal, can outrun the speed of thought. That's a quirky or fringe tidbit, Útgarðar-Loki used philosophy, not muscle, to defeat your companion. And then comes your own humiliation. The small gray house cat you struggled to lift was, in fact, the world-encircling sea serpent, Jörmungandr, your ancient and destined foe, disguised by formidable sorcery. The fact that you managed to lift its head high enough to force one paw off the ground was not a defeat, it was a feat of unparalleled, earth-shattering power. Historians still argue whether this particular tale functions primarily as a warning about the limits of perception or simply a testament to Thor's raw, underlying strength. You remember that agonizing moment, the strain, the sweat, the mocking laughter. You realize now that when you strained to lift the serpent, you were actually forcing the entire Midgard Sea to churn violently, causing massive tides and waves that reached the shores of the outer world. A mainstream historical fact is that the Norse worldview saw the ocean and the Midgard serpent as fundamentally linked, emphasizing the truly cosmic scale of the task you unknowingly undertook. The horn you failed to empty? It was connected directly to the outer ocean itself. The 3 attempts you made weren't embarrassing failures. They were miraculous acts that permanently lowered the level of the world's sea, creating the tides as they exist today. You drank the world's oceans, leaving only a negligible dent in the cosmic whole. And finally, the old woman who forced you to one knee, Ellie. She was the physical embodiment of old age, Eld. No living creature, not God, not giant, not man, can defeat the relentless march of time. Your struggle was not against a warrior, but against inevitability itself. The fact that you wrestled her for as long as you did was a divine achievement, not a defeat. Your pride surges back, replaced by a devastating understanding of the sheer power you possess and the depth of Útgarðar-Loki's trickery. You realize you were fighting fundamental forces of nature and existence, not just large opponents. You raise Mjölnir, now buzzing with unrestrained power, and demand satisfaction. You stride forward to smash the duplicitous king. But it is too late. The moment Útgarðar-Loki finishes his confession and turns his back, the entire magnificent fortress, the great hall, the massive gates, and the king himself instantly vanish, dissolving into mist and shadow. You are left alone on an empty, featureless plain. He used magic not just to trick you, but to anchor his entire kingdom in illusion. And once his purpose was served, the anchor was lifted. You swing Mjölnir in a blinding flash of fury, but the blow hits only empty air. You return to Asgard knowing you were tricked, but now possessing the devastating knowledge that you are strong enough to lift the world. The journey back to Asgard is significantly quieter than the journey to Útgarðar-Loki's hall. The frustration is still there. You were cheated out of a fair contest, but it is now overshadowed by quiet, profound realization of your own cosmic might. You didn't fail the challenges, you conquered them so thoroughly that the giants had to resort to bending the very fabric of reality to keep you from destroying their home. You begin to understand the true nature of your strength. It's not just muscle, it's an elemental force. You didn't just drink a lot, you moved the Midgard Sea. You didn't just wrestle an old woman, you battled time itself. This knowledge settles into you, giving you a new level of confidence, tempered by the awareness that even cosmic strength has metaphysical limits. You cannot punch an idea, and you cannot outrun inevitability. This is the moment you transition from a boisterous brute to a genuinely formidable divine force. This episode solidifies your role as the principal defender against chaos. The giants, having used up their most elaborate magical ruses, now truly fear you. They know that if they face you in a straight fight, even their mightiest will crumble before Mjölnir. This makes you the target of their deepest hatred and the focus of the inevitable, prophesied final conflict. Back in Asgard, the atmosphere shifts. While you are reveling in your newly confirmed supreme power, a shadow is beginning to creep across the sunlit courts. The focus of the mythological narrative shifts subtly from your heroic adventures to the overarching, tragic doom awaiting the gods, Ragnarök. The trigger for this decline is not a giant invasion or a misplaced hammer, but the increasingly dark dreams of your beloved half-brother, Baldur. Baldur is light, purity, and perfection, the very best of Asgard. In his dreams, he sees his own death. These dreams are so disturbing that Odin, the Allfather, rides his 8-legged steed, Sleipnir, down to the misty underworld of Hell to consult the spirit of a long-dead Volva, Ceres. A mainstream historical fact is that the belief in Fimbulvetur, the 3-year, Great Winter, and the death of Balder are universally cited across Scandinavian sources as the immediate precursors to Ragnarök. The Volva, roused from her eternal sleep, confirms the chilling prophecy: Balder will die. His death will be a direct cause of the cataclysm. Upon learning this, Frigg, the queen of Asgard and Balder's mother, desperate to save her son, travels across the 9 realms, extracting an oath from every living thing, every animal, every plant, every stone, every bit of metal, to never harm Balder. She takes these oaths so thoroughly that Balder becomes immune to all harm. The gods, relieved, start a joyous new game. They throw things, axes, rocks, spears, at Balder, watching them harmlessly bounce off his chest, confirming his invulnerability. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that the act of oath swearing on stones and weapons was a deep-rooted part of Norse legal and social custom. Frigg's magical mission is essentially a cosmic legal contract ensuring her son's safety, making the resulting loophole even more devastating. But Frigg misses one thing: the tiny, seemingly insignificant, parasitic plant called mistletoe. She deems it too small, too harmless, and too young to ever swear an oath. Loki, who has observed all of this with his usual calculating, jealous eye, sees the vulnerability. He approaches Thor, Balder's blind brother, who cannot participate in the fun game of throwing weapons at Balder. Loki, feigning helpfulness, gives Thor a dart made of mistletoe, guiding his hand and telling him it's a great honor to participate. Thor throws the dart, and it pierces Balder, killing him instantly. The only thing that did not swear an oath of protection was the single thing used to kill him. The death shatters the joyous atmosphere of Asgard, replacing it with overwhelming grief and terror. You, Thor, are not directly involved in the tragic event, but the implications land heavily upon you. Balder's death, orchestrated by your unpredictable brother Loki, is the first trumpet blast of the end times. It sets in motion a chain of cosmic consequences that cannot be undone. You now have a deeper, more personal reason to hate Loki, who is later punished severely for his crimes against the divine order. You realize that your upcoming battles with the giants and even your destined duel with the Midgard Serpent are no longer just adventures. They are desperate holding actions against a timeline already set in motion. Historians still argue whether Balder's death was originally a solar myth, the sun dying in winter, or purely a mythological mechanism to enable the final conflict. But its result is clear: the light is leaving the world, and only thunder can stand against the coming darkness. Your hammer swings now carry the weight of inevitable doom. The crushing reality of Balder's death and the necessary, but temporary, binding and banishment of Loki does not mean rest for the god of thunder. In fact, it sharpens your focus. The prophecy has been spoken. The pieces are moving, and the one true constant threat, the giant Jörmungandr, the Midgard Serpent, still lurks beneath the world's oceans. You know, deep in your divine heart, that your ultimate, fated duel is with this colossal beast. It is perhaps this existential burden that compels you to seek out a direct confrontation with the serpent. Long before the final days of Ragnarök, you are on another journey to the giant lands, and you seek the hospitality of the giant Hymir, a notoriously grumpy and possessive fisherman whose haul you need to access for a very specific, eccentric reason. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that Hymir is often depicted as having a giantess grandmother with 900 heads, demonstrating the truly bizarre and monstrous lineage of the giants you encounter. Hymir is not welcoming. He is immediately suspicious of you. This booming, massive god crashing his humble, or rather, colossal, abode. You decide to join Hymir on his daily fishing trip, perhaps as a way to earn his grudging respect, or simply because you need his boat. As you prepare the boat, Hymir brings forth all the standard fishing gear, the ropes and the bait. You, Thor, scoff at his meager offerings. You want something real. You stride back to Hymir's herd of cattle, select the largest, blackest ox, and with a single, brutal twist, rip the ox's head clean off its body. This is your bait. You intend to catch the biggest fish in the sea. A mainstream historical fact is that oxen, particularly their heads, were often used in ritual sacrifice in pagan Norse and Germanic cultures, adding a deep layer of traditional power to your shocking choice of bait. You row out with Hymir, leaving the mortal world behind. Hymir rows for miles until he reaches his normal, fruitful fishing grounds. You, however, are not satisfied. Row further. Giant, you command, we must go beyond the safe bounds. Hymir protests, warning that if they go any further, they risk encountering the legendary, fearsome Midgard serpent. You ignore him, seizing the oars yourself and rowing with such immense strength that the floorboards of the boat nearly shatter and the sea churns violently. Finally, you stop, satisfied that you are directly above the serpent's deepest lair. You prepare the line, a massive, impossibly strong rope, and you bait the enormous hook with the ox's head. You cast the line into the dark, churning abyss. You wait, the only sound the lapping of the waves and the terrified breathing of Hymir. Suddenly, the line goes taut, not just taut, but impossibly tight. The pull on the line is immense, a force that anchors you to the core of the planet. You brace yourself, your feet pushing through the boat's hull and straight down into the seabed itself, grinding the rocks beneath the ocean floor. You feel the sharp, terrible sting of the hook setting, and the weight on the other end is nothing less than the coiled, venom-dripping mass of Jörmungandr. The serpent struggles, its immense power nearly dragging you and the entire boat down into the crushing depths. You lean back, roaring with exertion, every ounce of your divine and earth-given strength focused on this one monumental task. You pull with such force that the seas part and the very rocks of the ocean floor crack under the strain. Slowly, inexorably, you begin to haul the serpent up. The Midgard serpent's massive, dripping head breaches the water's surface. It is a terrifying sight, eyes burning with ancient hatred, its mouth wide, dripping venom and sea foam. The two of you lock gazes, your destiny staring you down. You raise Mjölnir, ready to deliver the one decisive blow that will end the serpent 1,000 years too early and avert the fate of Ragnarök. You are ready to shatter destiny. But just as you are about to strike, the terrified giant Hymir, fearing the serpent's wrath and the inevitable destruction of his boat and the world, grabs his own fishing knife and hastily cuts your line. The serpent sinks instantly back into the depths with a colossal splash that creates massive tidal waves. You turn, not with the focused rage of battle, but with sheer, blinding fury at Hymir. You strike the giant a single, furious blow, sending him tumbling overboard and presumably back to shore. Thoroughly chastised, you then wade back to shore yourself. Disappointed, but having achieved a profound realization, you are strong enough to face your fate and pull the world's chaos to the surface. Historians still argue whether Thor successfully killed the serpent in this first encounter in earlier versions of the myth, suggesting the original conclusion may have been more decisive before the idea of a fixed Ragnarök took hold. You know, however, that the final fight still looms. The humiliation of the fishing trip, losing your great catch, Jörmungandr, to the cowardly act of a giant, fades slightly as a new, equally critical crisis grips Asgard. This incident, while less explosive than the theft of Mjölnir, is a fundamental threat to the gods' security and is, once again, born of the gods' own misplaced trust and Loki's meddling. This is the famous tale of the wall builder. Asgard, magnificent as it is, needs fortifications to hold back the growing chaos now that the prophecies of Ragnarök are circulating. One day, a mysterious, unnamed master builder, who introduces himself as a simple giant architect, arrives and offers to build an impenetrable wall around Asgard in the span of one winter. His price, however, is exorbitant. He demands the goddess Freya as his wife, along with the sun and the moon. The gods, of course, refuse the outrageous demand, but Loki, always the conniving strategist, whispers a truly terrible idea into Odin's ear. He suggests accepting the impossible terms, but with a crucial caveat: the giant must complete the massive wall alone, without the aid of any man, within a single winter. If he fails to complete it by the first day of summer, he gets nothing. Loki smugly believes this deadline is so tight that the giant will fail, and Asgard will get most of its wall built for free. Historians still argue whether the gods' reliance on Loki's ethically dubious advice here underscores their collective arrogance or their fear of the coming apocalypse. The giant architect accepts the modified terms. But he has a single condition. He is allowed the aid of his magnificent stallion. Svalfari, the gods, certain the horse cannot contribute that much to manual labor, agree. This is the god's second fatal mistake. The giant and his horse begin work. And you, Thor, are conveniently absent, off smashing giants elsewhere, which is why this dangerous deal is permitted in the first place. A mainstream historical fact is that Thor is often deliberately removed from the narrative in myths that focus on clever trickery or deception, as his presence would instantly solve the problem with brute force. The work proceeds with terrifying speed. Svalfari, the stallion, possesses superhuman strength and efficiency, pulling colossal stones into place with breathtaking velocity. As winter draws to a close, the wall is nearing completion, and the gods realize they have been thoroughly outmaneuvered. They will lose Freya, the sun and the moon. The gods turn on Loki, their resident genius troublemaker, threatening him with a terrible death unless he uses his trickery to sabotage the giant's final work. The task is simple: prevent Svalfari from completing his work. Loki, fearing your inevitable return and the righteous wrath of the Allfather, transforms himself into a beautiful mare in heat. He prances and whinnies, distracting the stallion Svalfari, who breaks away from his giant master to chase the enticing mare into the woods. The chase is long and passionate, lasting all night. The giant builder, without his impossibly strong workhorse, cannot complete the wall on time. He misses the deadline by a single stone. The giant, his colossal gamble ruined, realizes he has been played. He loses his composure, revealing his true, enormous giant nature. He erupts into a furious, world-shaking rage. And now, finally, you return to Asgard. You arrive just in time. You see the massive, enraged giant standing over the trembling, relieved gods, including a very sheepish Loki. You don't ask questions. You raise Mjölnir. You strike the giant architect with such force that you shatter his head and send his remains plummeting down into the cold abyss of Niflheimer. The threat is instantly neutralized. A quirky or fringe tidbit follows this. Later, Loki returns to Asgard, not only safe but pregnant. Having mated with Svalfari while in the form of a mare, he eventually gives birth to an 8-legged foal, the magnificent steed Sleipnir, which he gives to Odin. This chaotic, absurd event provides the Allfather with his most famous mount, born of the destruction of a treaty and the emasculation of a giant. The wall is complete, Asgard is safe, and Loki is forgiven, for the moment. But the price of safety, broken oaths, moral ambiguity, and the chaos sown by your brother, underscores the darkening era. The gods are now morally compromised, and the final conflict feels closer than ever. You return to Asgard, the stench of the giant architect's demise still clinging to Mjölnir. The immediate threat is neutralized, and you're satisfied with the clean, brutal efficiency of the outcome. Yet, the air is heavy with a sense of moral compromise and inevitability. The gods cheated, and the cost was the purity of their divine justice. Loki is safe, for now, but his actions have further complicated the cosmic fabric, adding another creature of chaos, Sleipnir's parentage, into the heart of Asgard. Now, with the prophecies confirmed by Baldur's death and the resulting chain of events, the gods must pivot from defense to preparation for the final conflict, Ragnarök. This means gathering allies and readying the forces that will fight alongside the Aesir. You find yourself increasingly within the halls of Valhalla, though not as a resident. Valhalla is Odin's magnificent hall where the souls of half the bravest human warriors, the Einherjar, who die in battle are brought by the Valkyries. These warriors spend their afterlife feasting, training, and perpetually sparring, preparing for the day the horn Gjallarhorn sounds. This is the ultimate, massive, well-equipped standing army of Asgard. A mainstream historical fact is that the concept of Valhalla and the Valkyries was a key motivator for Viking warriors, who sought a glorious death in battle, a good death, to secure their place among the Einherjar. This belief system fueled the martial culture of the Norse world. While Valhalla is the primary focus for Odin, you, Thor, Also have your own equivalent, the Hall Vingolf, sometimes simply Ruhamr. Your domain, where the souls of those who died with great virtue, strength, and perhaps less dramatic battle prowess are gathered. These are the Ruvingr warriors, often considered the strong protectors of the common people, reflecting your own role as the working god, the defender of Midgard, not just the elite fallen. You spend your time sharpening your armor, reinforcing your strength belt, and most importantly, maintaining the perfect condition of Mjölnir. This hammer is not just your weapon, it is the ultimate symbol of the resistance. You know that when the final battle comes, the success or failure of the Aesir will largely hinge on your ability to hold the line against the forces of Muspelheim, fire giants, and Jotunheimr, frost giants. The gods are also acutely aware of the forces gathering against them. Loki, though bound after Baldur's death, has monstrous children who are destined to play devastating roles in the final conflict. You already know Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, is waiting. His twin siblings are equally terrifying, the giant wolf Fenrir and Hel, the ruler of the underworld, and the destination for those who die without glory or in sickness. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that the Aesir were so terrified of the growing power of the wolf Fenrir when he was a cub that they tried to bind him 3 times. The first 2 chains he snapped easily. The third, unbreakable chain, Gleipnir, was forged by dwarves from 6 impossible ingredients: the sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the sinews of a bear, the breath of a fish, and the spittle of a bird. This shows the extremes the gods went to in order to contain the chaos Loki spawned. You prepare for the worst, knowing the final battle will be chaotic, world-ending, and ultimately fatal for most involved. You understand your fated opponent is Jörmungandr, but you also know that your primary role will be to fend off the colossal forces of the giants as they storm Asgard's walls. The preparations are methodical, but the quiet desperation is palpable. Every clang of a weapon in Valhalla, every gust of wind across the completed wall, and every star in the sky is a reminder that time is running out. Historians still argue whether the Norse truly believed that the gods wanted Ragnarök to happen, as a final, necessary cleansing, or whether they merely accepted it as unavoidable fate, wyrd. But for you, the attitude is simpler. You don't care why it's happening. You only care that when it does, you will be the absolute last god standing. You are the immovable object against the unstoppable chaos. The long-dreaded moment finally arrives. The prophecies of destruction begin to unfold, not in a single, sudden burst, but in a horrific, drawn-out sequence of cosmic calamities. First comes the Fimbulvetr, the great winter. The sun vanishes, swallowed by the sky wolf skull, and the moon is devoured by his brother Hati. The world is plunged into 3 years of ceaseless winter. Snow falls from all directions, freezing the Midgard Sea into an impenetrable sheet of ice. Humanity, starved and brutalized by the endless cold, descends into violence, destroying the moral fabric of the world. This is the death of civilization, the collapse of human order, a necessary prelude to the death of the gods. A mainstream historical fact is that the Fimbulvetr myth may have been inspired by actual climate events in Scandinavian history, like the extreme weather following the volcanic eruptions of 536 CE, which ushered in a period of cooling and famine. Then, the tremors begin. Earthquakes shake the foundations of the 9 realms with a violence never before seen. The world tree, Yggdrasil, groans, the movement causing chains to snap and mountains to split. Deep in the realm of Niflheimr, the greatest prisoner of all breaks free, Fenrir, the colossal wolf, who snaps the unbreakable chain Gleipnir with a sound like ripping silk. His jaws gape so wide that his lower jaw scrapes the ground and his upper jaw scrapes the sky. At the same time, deep beneath the oceans, the vibrations rouse your ancient enemy. Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent, thrashes violently, swimming up through the churning sea. His movements create enormous tidal waves that swallow the coasts of Midgard, and he spews venom that poisons the air and the land. Remember your humiliating encounter in the giant hall? You were strong enough to move this beast, but now he moves of his own terrifying will. The forces of chaos begin their march. The boat Nogfar, famously constructed entirely from the untrimmed fingernails and toenails of the dead, a quirky or fringe tidbit that served as a constant reminder to the living to keep their nails trimmed to delay Ragnarök, breaks free from its moorings and sets sail. Captained by Loki himself, recently freed by the quakes. From the fiery south, Muspelheimer, the fire giants arrive, led by Surtur, whose enormous, blazing sword cuts a fiery swath across the heavens. The only signal left is the horn. The Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, shatters under the weight of the charging hostile forces. The keeper of the bridge, Heimdallr, raises his horn, Gjallarhorn, and sounds the loudest, most piercing blast ever heard. A cosmic alarm that signals the final muster. You, Thor, do not wait. You seize Mjölnir, which now feels impossibly light and terrifyingly powerful. You strap on your iron gloves and strength belt. You mount your chariot, pulled by the steadfast goads. Tangrisnir and Tanioster, you know exactly where you must go. To the plains of Vigrir, the vast field where the final battle will be waged. You charge across Asgard, the thunder of your chariot an echo of the destructive chaos surrounding you. Odin rallies the Einherjar from Valhalla. Tyr, the one-handed god of single combat, prepares to face the wolf Fenrir. Frey, the god of fertility and peace, prepares to battle the fire giant Surtur, regretting the foolish decision to give away his magic sword long ago. But your path is clear. Your duty is to protect the collapsing remnants of the realms from the Jotun forces. Your first major task is to hold the line against the masses of giants attempting to breach the gods' position. You are the ultimate frontline defense, and you rage like the storm incarnate. Historians still argue whether the field of Vigrir was meant to be a literal place or a metaphorical representation of the final, decisive confrontation between order and chaos. But for you, it is simply the place where you must fight and, ultimately, fall. The air is thick with fire, venom, and the roar of 1,000 chaotic voices. You are the storm that arrives to meet the fire. You charge toward your destiny, the last glorious defense against the inevitable end. You arrive at the vast, desolate plain of Vigrir, a field so immense it is said to stretch for 100 leagues in every direction. The atmosphere is less a battleground and more the literal collapse of reality. The sky is split open, raining fire and venom. The smell of burning worlds fills your nostrils. The battle is immediate and overwhelming. You find yourself in the thickest fighting, facing the legions of Jotnar, giants, who have poured onto the field. Fueled by generations of hatred for the Aesir. This is your element. You are the immovable object. You charge forward in your chariot, swinging Mjölnir with relentless, blinding fury. Each strike is a clap of thunder, vaporizing hundreds of giants instantly, creating craters in the field. You move with a purpose no other god possesses, sheer, focused destruction of the forces of chaos. Your father, Odin, rides into the fray, Speargingnir in hand, leading the charge of the Einherjar. He immediately confronts his own destined foe, Fenrir. The colossal wolf, Tyr, the god of honor, is also there, ready for his fatal duel with the hound Garmr, the enormous guardian of the gates of hell. The scene is a maelstrom of gods, monsters, heroes, fire, and ice. A mainstream historical fact. The description of the gods fighting their destined counterparts at Ragnarök reflects the deeply rooted Norse concept of Wyrd, or fate. While the gods knew their individual fates, they chose to meet them with courage and honor, emphasizing the heroic ideal of dying well, even in a guaranteed losing battle. You are so effective in your defense against the giants that your path is relatively clear when your true, long-awaited opponent finally appears. Emerging from the churning, poisoned waters is Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. He is more enormous and more terrifying than he was during your fishing trip. His coils covering the land, his venom dripping from his fangs, pooling on the field in toxic lakes. You lock eyes with him once more. This is the moment you both have been waiting for, the final personal score to settle, the culmination of your power against the embodiment of the world's primal chaos. The duel is simple, direct, and devastatingly powerful. Jörmungandr rears up, his serpentine body a living, moving mountain, spitting a blinding torrent of venom. You roar a challenge that drowns out the noise of the battle. And you advance. You use your shield to deflect the worst of the poison, but your armor and skin are still splattered. the venom burning like 1,000 suns. This is the poison that can kill the world, and it is coursing into your divine veins. You raise Mjölnir with both hands, the energy of the storm focused into a single, terrifying mass. You throw the hammer, not at the head, but directly into the face of the serpent. The impact is deafening. It is the sound of the world ending. The serpent's skull is crushed instantly, and Jörmungandr collapses, his massive body writhing and convulsing, causing the earth to shake with final, agonizing spasms. You have succeeded. You have avenged your humiliating encounter and killed the greatest of all monsters. But the victory is poisoned. The serpent's venom has done its job. As Jörmungandr dies, his massive body sinks, his toxic breath and blood spreading everywhere. You take 9 steps away from the corpse, counting them out, staggering, fighting the poison coursing through your veins. On the 9th step, you collapse. The venom is too potent, the wound too deep. You fall dead upon the plain of Vigrir, the great hammer Mjölnir falling from your lifeless grip. You have won your final battle, but lost the war of existence. A quirky or fringe tidbit is the concept that the number of steps, 9, reflects the 9 realms of the Norse cosmos, suggesting that your final walk is a symbolic journey across the entire collapsing universe. You meet your death, not through a lack of strength, but through the overwhelming toxicity of your fated foe. In the midst of this cataclysm, other gods are falling. Odin is swallowed whole by Fenrir. Though Odin's son, Ver, immediately avenges him, the great world is devoured by fire as Surtur battles Frey. Everything is crashing down. Historians still argue whether the number of steps Thor takes was meant to parallel the steps of Christ carrying the cross in later Christianized narratives, but its mythological power as a symbol of sacrifice is undeniable. Your story, the story of the mighty protector, ends in ultimate sacrifice. The world burns. The fire of Surtur engulfs the heavens and the earth, melting the ice, collapsing the mountains, and consuming the very field of Vigrir. You lie dead, 9 steps from the cooling, toxic corpse of your ultimate foe, Jörmungandr. The sound of Mjölnir hitting the ground is the final punctuation mark on the world that was. Your family is gone. Odin has been avenged by his silent son, Ver, who tears the jaws of Fenrir apart. Tyr and Garmr have killed each other. Loki and Heimdallr, the 2 great antagonists of Asgard, have ended each other in a fierce, final duel. The fire consumes everything, the Grand Hall of Valhalla, the golden towers of Asgard, the human realm of Midgard, and the dark realm of Hel. The chaos that was suppressed for so long has finally, completely, won. This is the ultimate fate of the Norse cosmos, the necessary, inevitable Ragnarök, the doom of the gods. It is total destruction. Yet, the story of Thor, and the story of the Norse cosmos, is not purely about annihilation, it is about the cycle of renewal. The destruction must be absolute for something new to be born. The flames eventually die down, the smoke clears, and the great silence descends upon the ruins. Historians still argue whether the concept of a new world emerging after Ragnarök was an original feature of the pre-Christian Germanic faith or an interpolation influenced by Christian concepts of resurrection. But it offers a powerful message of hope. From the ashes, the cycle begins again. The sea, which was poisoned and churned by the great serpent, begins to retreat, healing itself. The land rises once more, green and fertile, untouched by the chaos of the former age. And from the vast destruction, a few survivors emerge. You do not return, but your legacy lives on. Among the survivors are 2 of your sons, Moi, courage, and Magni, strength, who embody your greatest qualities. The sons of Odin also survive, Ver, the silent avenger, and Vali, born for vengeance. These surviving gods gather on the grassy plain of Eivillr, where Asgard once stood. They do not rebuild the old world, they begin to construct a new, simpler, less fatalistic world. The most poignant moment of this dawning age is when your sons, Moi and Magni, approach the gathering. They bring with them the most recognizable symbol of the former age, Mjölnir. Your mighty hammer, too heavy and powerful for any other god to wield, is now taken up by your sons. They will use the hammer to clear the remnants of the chaos and establish peace in the new world. Your strength lives on, not in your own booming presence, but in the hands of the next generation of protectors. A quirky or fringe tidbit is that 2 humans also survived the cataclysm. Having hidden deep within the roots of the world tree. Yggdrasil. Leaf, life, and Lifrasir, striving for life. They emerged to repopulate the new green world, guided by the simple laws of the surviving gods. The era of the warrior god is over. The era of the farmer god begins. Your sacrifice was not in vain. You did not save the old world. But your final, decisive action allowed the new world to be born without the immediate, paralyzing threat of the Midgard serpent. You died protecting the universe. And in your death, you guaranteed its quiet, cyclical continuation. You are remembered as the greatest champion. The one who fought the hardest and never once wavered. Even when facing a death he knew was guaranteed. Your story is the ultimate heroic tragedy. The champion who achieves victory only in defeat. And so, the thunder falls silent, the storm passes, and the era of the warrior god yields to the promise of peace. Carried forward by the weight and legacy of your mighty, familiar hammer. The noise of the story fades now, doesn't it? The echoes of the thunder and the distant roar of the final fire begin to recede, leaving only the quiet rustle of the new world's growing grass. Take a slow, deep breath, and feel the weight of the hammer lift from your mind. That immense pressure, the fate of all 9 realms, is gone now. It was a heavy story, full of fire and fury. But the end wasn't truly an end, was it? It was a settling, a falling away of the old, broken things. Picture that final image one last time, the green, soft plain, and the younger gods, your own sons, standing there with Mjölnir, ready to simply build, not to fight. That is the peace you bought with your final 9th step. It's quiet now, and that's a good thing. Let the heavy images drift away, like smoke from the final fires, leaving you only with the comfortable knowledge that after every great storm, there is always, always, a deep, beautiful stillness. You are safe here, listening to the gentle hum of the world. Just relax now. Let your body settle completely into the mattress. All the fighting is done. Sweet dreams.